Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the City Planning Commission, Tuesday, July 5th. Can I get a confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice have been properly provided?
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a roll call, please?
I will call roll of commissioners. Commissioner Farber?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Waters?
Here.
Commissioner Gilmore? Commissioner Mike Sell? Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Chair Hay.
Here.
That gives us a quorum of 5 members present, and that allows us to proceed with today's agenda.
Okay, we'll drop down into new business and public items, or public hearing items.
Approve the minutes.
We want to,
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Can I get a approval of the minutes for June 21st?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from June 21st.
Second.
I had a motion for approval of the 21st minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. Okay, now we will jump down into new business and the public hearing items.
we have 2 public hearing items for the Commission's consideration this afternoon. Both of them are conditional use permits. The next item on your agenda is Agenda Item 3.1. That's a conditional use permit application filed by Eric Clayton, and he's requesting Planning Commission approval of a conditional use permit to allow a drinking establishment in the C4 Central Business District. The location that we are talking about is the building referred to as the Crest Building. It's addressed as 134 South Santa Fe, and the specific location for the proposed drinking establishment is the basement, Suite B200. So,
Mr. Andrews, before we continue, I'm going to recuse myself from this item.
okay. So the building in question has been in this present location since 1909, and or actually the actual building was there and built in 1910 for the S.H. Kress Company. There's a nameplate on the building at the top that identifies it as the Kress Building. It was the location of a Kress variety store for a long period of time, and then was later a fabric store, and was also the location of Brown Mackey College. Brown Mackey College became a tenant on the upper floor part of this building beginning in 1963, and they relocated out to a location on South 9th Street in 1999 before closing their doors. There was an elevator that was installed in this building in 1981. A local developer, Mr. Brian Richardson, purchased this building in 2007, and he completed a renovation of the existing storefront, which established 4 business spaces in the basement and the ground floor, and then there's 5 loft apartments on the second story. There was a stairwell constructed in the front of the building that Dustin's pointing to there, so there's a recessed front facade with a stairwell and a landing to the basement, and the business spaces are set back from the front facade to accommodate access to this open stairwell. There's a railing that separates the sidewalk from the stairwell, and upon entering the vestibule, tenants and customers have access to ground floor business entrances and a stair and elevator servicing the lofts on the second floor. So our current applicant is Mr. Eric Clayton. He indicates he's been looking for an opportunity to add a different type of drinking establishment in Salina for a number of years, and he has identified this property downtown on South Santa Fe. His plan is to bring a wine bar to this basement location that would serve wine, high-end whiskey, and very simple meals. The initial plan was for this bar to be open Thursday through Sunday, 3 p.m. to 12 a.m. with the potential to be open on other days depending on what's going on downtown. This total ground floor basement area contains 5,200 square feet. It's divided into 3 tenant spaces, and this proposed bar would occupy the southernmost portion of that basement. By our reading of the plans, this tenant space has about 1,000 square feet of that basement, and the seating plan that was submitted by the applicant's architect that you see depicted there shows an occupant load of 46 seats. There will be a kitchen area, but it will be a bare bones kitchen with no cooking proposed except for occasional use of a microwave. They most likely will have a 3-compartment sink, but no range or range hood system. There's a proposal to add men's and women's restrooms. The other thing we would note is that this building is completely sprinkled. So dating back to 2001, when there were some issues associated with the concentration of downtown drinking establishments, the Downtown Board of Advisors and the City Commission determined that drinking establishment locations and outdoor patios in the downtown central business district should be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission before they opened. And I would just preface that by indicating that the state of Kansas is pretty unusual from the standpoint that there's really no such thing as a local liquor license. They're all administered through the state alcohol beverage control. And so if you were in another state, in another community, and you had a bar that was causing problems for the neighbors or the general downtown area, the city commission could just suspend or lift their liquor license, but you can't do that in Kansas, but you can revoke a conditional use permit. So there's a number of cities in Kansas that use the conditional use permit for drinking establishments because the tool to suspend or lift liquor licenses is not available. So it serves as a substitute for that. But as a conditional use, this required that we notify neighbors within 200 feet and conduct a public hearing. And your role is to determine whether the proposed use in this location would have a negative impact on the public or surrounding property in the downtown district. So if you're familiar with C4, it allows buildings to be set right at the property line. Buildings can cover 100% of a building lot. Businesses downtown do not have to provide their own private off-street parking. They can utilize on-street parking or public lots, but there's no obligation to provide independent parking for a business. And so this building has a 0 setback. It covers 100% of the lot. It's connected to an adjacent building on the south, and there's a pedestrian arcade located on the north side. There's a total of 50 feet of frontage on Santa Fe, and then the west wall backs up to the AT&T building, but the arcade to the north of this building connects to a parking lot which is accessed from 7th Street. And that you would have on-street parking available on Santa Fe and public parking available in the 7th Street parking lot. There's no specific requirements for drinking establishments in the C4 district, but the Planning Commission has adopted and used certain criteria for evaluating the impact of a drinking establishment. And so if we look at what the surrounding property and neighborhood is, you have the former J.C. Penney, former location of the Dollar General store, which has moved over to East Iron. There's a covered pedestrian arcade and the Blush Boutique to the north. There's residential lots upstairs. But if you look at this block as a whole, it's a very active block. you've got the Stiefel Theater to the southeast. You have the Art Center Cinema on this block. You have Martinelli's. You have Auntie Rita's. And coming soon, we will have the Prickly Pear Cantina, which is located adjacent to Campbell Plaza. And they have a license agreement which allows them to utilize Campbell Plaza as a serving area. And so that will make Campbell Plaza a major activity center on this block. And we think that would overshadow any impacts from this proposed wine bar. As we look at it, it's modest in size, it's modest in seating. There's no dance floor. It doesn't appear that they'd have any place for a stage or live musical performances. There's no dedicated outdoor patio or serving area, and we have not received any responses from any of the neighboring property owners that were notified about this hearing. So, from staff's perspective, this looks like a low-key drinking establishment that will not have a noticeable impact on surrounding properties. We would request that the applicant provide additional information about the type of private rental events, if any, that might occur in this space and how those would be managed and supervised. We have all the utilities in place that are needed to serve the proposed use. As we noted, there's a limited number of on-street spaces on Santa Fe. There's a public parking lot to the west. If you look at the business hours when the wine bar would be in peak use, a number of the other nearby businesses would be closed. And so this will not be open on weekdays during peak retail business hours. So we kind of summarized the characteristics and location of this for you on page 6. So we're looking at 1,000 square feet and a seating area of 46. There's no cooking or food preparation. There's no dance floor. There's no proposal for live music. There's, Dustin, you may want to go back to that picture of the stairwell. We would ask the applicant to clarify this, but we were posed a question about whether there could be a table or chairs or stools or whatever in this area out in here, and that's within the footprint of the building and it's covered by a roof, so we would not consider that to be an outside serving area. It's just if the applicant does wish to utilize that space to have tables or chairs there and an open window opening there, they would just need to make sure that in their application for a state license that they show that as part of their premises. As we indicated, the hours of operation are 3 p.m. to 12 a.m. Thursday through Sunday. We're not really near any churches or schools or youth activity centers. There is residential development in the form of lofts that are directly upstairs, but those are going to be buffered by the first floor. And then if we look at the concentration of drinking establishments, Stiefel Theater has a drinking establishment license. It's 250 feet away. Martinelli's has a drinking establishment license. They're 200 feet away. You're 150 feet away to the Prickly Pear. And as we noted, we would ask the applicant to clarify about any rentals or private events. But if you find that the requirements for a conditional use permit have been satisfied and looked at the guidelines or criteria for reviewing drinking establishments, and you conclude that this would not have a negative impact on surrounding businesses or properties, then you could approve the wine bar's conditional use permit application as requested. You could approve it subject to any conditions or revisions to their floor plan that you think are appropriate. You could postpone consideration if additional information is needed before taking action, or you could deny this application if you don't think the required findings can be made, or if you think this would be incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So our request, in addition to the question about renting the facility out, would be to clarify what the intended serving area and licensed premises would be. And based on the low intensity of this use compared to other drinking establishments on the block, we would recommend approval of this conditional use permit application with the following conditions: that development and use substantially correspond to the approved floor plan, and that if there's any substantial modifications to the plan or the features or an outdoor serving area were added, that would require approval of an amendment of the conditional use permit by the Planning Commission. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that commissioners may have of staff.
Okay, any questions for staff? I guess the only one I have, it said there's no cooking or no food preparation, but yet you're still going to have, to be just like a wine, I mean, just like a cheese board, stuff like that, just to,
It may be cheeses, cold meats, bread, things like that, but nothing that would require cooking or preparation. And so the state of Kansas distinguishes between pure drinking establishments and restaurants through the type of kitchen that you have, and also by your percentage of food sales. And so Martinelli's is a true restaurant that serves alcohol with a full commercial kitchen. This is not a full restaurant with wine and alcohol sales. It's primarily a bar or drinking establishment, and that's why it has come before you this afternoon.
front entrance, and then there is a rear entrance?
There is a rear exit for emergency purposes, but the entrance of coming and going, based on the occupant load being below 50, they can have that single entry point. Plus, we'd point out that the building is sprinkled, but there is an emergency exit out the back, and the applicant can elaborate on that. But because of the occupant load and the fact that it's sprinkled, the primary entrance and exit will be over on the east side through the stairwell.
How do you police 46 occupancy? I mean, how, with being downstairs in a...
It's not easy, because that's going to be, the challenge that you have is when you have a space that by square footage could accommodate more than 46. We have, that question came up on the hearing on the library on South Santa Fe, and so it's a matter of enforcing the seating plan. Every year, the Salina Fire Department does walk-through inspections. This will have a posted occupant load, and so that occupant load is monitored primarily by the fire department as part of their annual inspections.
Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything, add anything?
I don't have any.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
We would want the applicant to clarify two things. One, if there's any plan to serve outside the wall of the building out in here, and then any plans for renting the facility out for special events or something, whether that would be included as part of the business plan.
None of that's my intentions at the moment. I mean, it could develop down the road, but as far as now, no.
Have you looked at the two conditions that were?
Yes, I agree
Do
with.
you have any problem with those?
No, sir.
Okay.
And the occupancy thing is, I work for the Salina Fire Department, so I better behave on that, right?
Any more questions?
I think you answered the questions I had, so.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions for staff or no more questions for the applicant, I'll bring it back up to commission for action.
So I'll make a motion that we approve application CU 22-6 with the 2 conditions on page 7.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 4-0. Thank you.
For the benefit of the applicant, that allows me, the zoning administrator, to sign their liquor license application. That would go up to ABC, so.
Thanks. Okay, we'll drop down to 3.2.
Item 3.2 is also a conditional use permit
Excuse
application.
me a second, Dean. Can we ask
yeah, we
Commissioner,
Get Mr. Olson. to come back.
Commissioner Olson to step back in? Didn't want to forget him out there and let him be sitting out there waiting for it.
So our second public hearing item this afternoon is also a conditional use permit application, and that's been filed by Desiree D. O'Shea, and the request is a conditional use permit to allow a group daycare home to be established and operate in a single-family residential zoning district. The property in question is located in the Cloud Edition at the west end of Bachtold Avenue, where it intersects with Cherokee Drive, which is officially still a street but is closed to traffic. And we'll let Mr. Hers cover this application for you.
Thank you, Dean and Commission. So the little bit of background on the property is part of the Cloud Edition, and that was platted in 1955, and later that same year, the current residence was constructed. So the original building permit for the dwelling that the applicant resides in was started construction, or a building permit was issued in late 1955. So that's kind of the background of the property. As Dean mentioned, Cherokee Drive, which has an 80-foot right-of-way, is a public right-of-way that was part of the Cloud Edition subdivision when it was platted. However, the road itself was never constructed, and in 1984, the City Commission officially closed Cherokee Drive with no intentions of ever paving on Cherokee Drive. So there is...
I will correct that, just a point, Dustin, that actually Cherokee Drive was built and open to traffic. And
But then it was closed.
It was closed due to complaints about speeding and cut-through traffic and things of that nature. So it was open at one time, but it was closed in 1984, but not vacated, just closed.
Yes, so the right-of-way still exists, but if you were to go out there today, what you would see would be kind of the gravel surfacing that is out there, but you won't see any paving. So it's a dead-end street, and this is what it currently looks like, and this is the applicant's property here. So another piece of history that's a little important for this particular case is there was a variance that was issued in 2008 for a detached garage. So there, if you look at the aerial photo, you do see a rather large 30 by 40 detached garage, which exceeds the maximum limitation that we have in the city of Salina for R1 properties. And that garage was constructed, or was allowed, and a building permit was issued through a variance that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in August of 2008. So that's another piece of history in the background of this particular property. The applicant has been operating a daycare from this facility, a licensed daycare, for almost 2 years, and is looking to expand that licensed daycare into a group daycare home setting. And as we've talked about in the past with similar conditional use permit applications, when you transition from a licensed daycare to a group daycare home, it requires a public hearing before this body to make sure that that group daycare home is conducive and appropriate for the surrounding area and the neighborhood. So as we go through that, we go through the criteria of a conditional use. And the first criteria is the compliance with the zoning ordinance and the regulations. And I've got a table that is also in your packet on page 4 that kind of breaks down what's required and what is proposed or existing with the applicant's site. And so as we go through the right-hand column of what's being proposed or what is existing, you'll see that it meets all of the required elements of an R1 property, with the exception of 2 things. One is the setback along Cherokee, which the existing garage and building have a 12-foot setback, and that was approved as part of the variance that was issued in 2008 for the detached garage. So if you look at the property itself, you'll note that, I'll pull up a graphic. You'll note that the property line is only 12 feet away from the structures, and that was approved through that variance that was approved in 2008. Looking at the welfare and convenience of the public, the applicant states that the proposed group daycare home will allow her to provide for additional children within the city of Salina and benefit the community and the city as a whole because of that. The applicant is proposing to expand her daycare to care for 2 additional children. The Building Services Division, as well as the Fire Department and the Health Department, have all done a site visit to the site, conducted the inspection, and have confirmed that they are in compliance with all life safety elements and the requirements, and that we would agree that the proposed group daycare home could contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public, particularly those in the Sunset Elementary School district or neighborhood area, which is where this particular property is located. And looking at the injury to the surrounding public, the applicant isn't proposing any changes, any physical changes to what's existing today. And so what we typically do is we look at the neighborhood itself and what is adjacent and the impacts that the proposed use could have. And we would note that the injury or potential injury or effect that could be present would be limited to the property directly to the north and the property directly to the east. Because of the vacated Cherokee, there is an 80-foot right-of-way that acts as a buffer between the existing property of the applicant and the manufactured home park further to the west. So there is a very limited number of people who could potentially be affected. The biggest change that we see when we go from a licensed daycare to a group daycare home is usually the addition of the 2 children and the additional traffic that could potentially bring, as well as the required off-street parking for the assistant care provider. In this case, Bachtold is a dead-end street because Cherokee is closed, so there's very minimal traffic. Anyone that comes into this area is there intentionally, so there's no through traffic. So the additional traffic that will be generated shouldn't have any negative impacts on the surrounding area. And the off-street parking, which we'll get into a little bit later when we get into the analysis, appears to be sufficient. I do have some pictures of the playground area that the property has. So one thing that is unique about this property is they kind of have what we would call 2 backyards. I mean, from a technical standpoint, because it's a corner lot on Cherokee and Bachtold, it has 2 front yards, 2 side yards, no rear yard. But from a functional standpoint, you have this space between the detached garage and the house that acts as a backyard, and then you also have, and this is the garage, and then you also have another backyard between the fence, the north fence, and the shed that is also another backyard, and this is the play area. So if you were to look at it in an aerial photo, it would basically be this area through here. So there's a chain link fence that's on the north, on the west, and then also on the east, and that's what the play area is confined by. So we do have a fenced-in area for the play area. And looking at domination of the neighborhood, the applicant, again, points out that they're not creating or proposing any changes to the site, to the landscaping, to any of the structure, and that if you were to drive by, it would appear as a residential dwelling just as it does today. All of the surrounding properties were constructed in the late 1950s, early 60s, so the applicant's property definitely blends in. If you were to go up, down Bachtold or other properties within the Cloud Edition, they look like they fit. There's nothing discerningly different about the existing daycare, and so having the daycare grow from a licensed daycare to a group daycare home shouldn't have any negative impacts on dominating the neighborhood. Off-street parking, this is one of the areas that sometimes is difficult for people going from a licensed daycare to a group daycare setting, because you are required by the state to have an assistant care provider, and that care provider is required to have an off-street parking space. In this case, because the applicant has an uniquely oversized garage, that's 1,200 square feet, they do have 4 off-street parking spaces within the garage, and there's also a driveway on the south side of the property that can be used for a assistant care provider. So the applicant has the ability to park their vehicles in the detached garage, leaving the driveway on the south side of the building right off of Bachtold available for an assistant. And because Bachtold Avenue is a dead-end street with very minimal traffic, curbside drop-off and pickup is something that shouldn't be an issue for the children and their families and care providers. So in total, the site has 5 off-street parking spaces. They're required to have 3, and they exceed that minimum requirement. So some of our comments and observations is that the applicant has been operating a licensed daycare from this location for the last 22 months without any issues. The site inspection that was conducted by Building Services, the Fire Department, and the County Health Department has concluded that the site meets all of the requirements, life safety requirements for an increase of care to a group daycare home. And so with that, there are a few alternatives that you have. Starting on the bottom of page 7, you could approve the conditional use permit as submitted upon finding that the requirements of the conditional use permit and the code have been satisfied. Number 2, you could approve the conditional use permit subject to any specific conditions or revisions. Number 3, you could postpone action if you feel additional information is required. And number 4, you could deny the applicant's request if you don't feel the findings of fact are appropriately being made. On page 8, we do have 5 findings of fact that we have found as a staff that you could consider. And if you do consider, we do have a condition that's pretty standard that we use for daycares, and that is for that no more than 12 children may be cared for at any one time in accordance with the state standards for the group daycare home license. And there's also an additional possible condition that the board has entertained and used in certain situations, and that is the Planning Commission also has the discretion to limit conditional use permit to the applicant only, which would mean that the permit would terminate if the applicant ceased to operate the group daycare home at this location. It would not be transferable to another provider. That's something that on a case-by-case basis, the Planning Commission has also used as a condition of approval. Typically, when we approve a conditional use permit as a Planning Commission, that conditional use permit runs with the land and isn't tied to the specific operator or owner. And so that's why that is an option for you, but it is not something that is typically or always done and looked at. So with that, staff would take any questions that the board may have, and hope we can answer those.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for staff? Sounds like it's pretty cut and dried.
All right.
Any questions for the applicant, or would the applicant like to say anything?
Basically, I've been.
Would you like to step up front and give your name and, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I got it 7 months back. My name's Desiree Shea. I've been a licensed daycare for over 20 years. This is my daughter. She's going to be my helper. She lives at the home also. She's 20. Really, I don't have anything else to really say. That's a house I grew up in. I bought it from my parents when I moved. So I know the whole area and surrounding area and my stomping grounds and
So
everything.
you don't have any problem with the condition of no more than 12?
No.
Okay.
So.
Do you have a maximum of number of children that you're looking to get, or you just?
I would like to, in the summertime, I wouldn't mind having the 12. My goal is 10 to 12. Just depends on the age and, the kids and the kids looking for care. Does that make sense?
Okay. There's no more questions for staff, or no more questions for applicant? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll bring it back up to the commission for some action.
I'd make a motion to approve application CU 22-7 with the requirement on page 8 of no more than 12. And then I would also do that the conditional use permit would be strictly for the applicant. It would transfer to another provider.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more? Oh, yes, something?
I have a question. So say, this is new to me, so I just got a question. So say I move in Salina, do I have to go back through this process again, or does that go with me to the new house?
It would, if you had a new location, you would have to get that location approved as
Okay.
well. Your
Okay.
your license through the state would stay with you, but the location, if you had a new location, that would be reviewed and approved in the same way this one was.
Okay, I'm not planning on moving anytime soon.
Can I get some feedback on that addition that you were putting in there, that it stays with the applicant and not with the property?
So that just means that if she moves and somebody else buys it to have a licensed daycare there, this doesn't automatically transfer to them. So that if she doesn't then sell it as a daycare facility type situation.
I get it, I understand, that's a good marketing point if you're able to sell it and say, hey, this land has a conditional use permit alongside it.
Yeah, and the main reason I've done it is just to make sure that the people so that they've gone through the review process and make sure that everybody that's done it, everybody's then comfortable with that group coming forward with it, so.
Makes sense. So if somebody else moved in and they wanted this group daycare home setting, they would have to apply for the conditional use again and
In
come
their
back in
own,
front of
in
us.
their own right, yes.
In their own right, okay.
Okay. So we got a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. Okay.
As far as other matters or other business, we got through another fireworks season. The planning division is, we're mostly in charge of the setup and review and licensing of the consumer fireworks stands. There were 12 in the city limits this year. That's the most we've ever had since fireworks were legalized in 2011. And we don't regulate what happens to the fireworks after they're purchased, just the setup of the stands and their parking and selling and all of those things. We are planning to give you the rest of July off, and so we will not have a planning commission meeting the 19th of July. Unfortunately, Mr. Olson is on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Board of Zoning Appeals will meet on the 21st of July, but we will not meet again until August the 2nd. And we have the final plat coming back for the Aeroplanes addition, which is out there north of Schilling Road and east of Centennial Road. And so that will be the final plat of that. And then, Dustin, do you want to give an update on our follow-up visit to the library and some of the things that were discussed?
Sure. So after we had the library bar and grill public hearing for their outdoor sound system that we talked about, staff, that which included building services personnel and myself, did an on-site visit with them to go through the list of nonconformities that we identified in our staff report that we presented to you. And so really the ball's in their court where they've got the list of violations and nonconformities that are going to need to be addressed before you would be able to approve their outdoor sound system that they've proposed. And so they are in the efforts of working with that. Now, some of those items are more extensive than others. Some of those items require obtaining additional off-street parking. Some of them require potentially variances with the Board of Zoning Appeals. And some of them require revised plans from an architect. So depending on which one of the 11 elements that you look at or which one of the 11 nonconformities you look at, some of them are, like I said, quite extensive. So I wouldn't anticipate that they would be back before this body anytime soon, but it's something that they are going to have to work on, and they are working on.
So quick question with that then. So with the anticipation that fall football season is coming up that I know everybody's looking forward to and that they would be having people outside, how's that going to be monitored by the city that they're not actually?
Using the sound system?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what we did previously was we had not the sound system, we had the speakers removed so that the speakers were no longer present or hooked up to the wires. And so I think that would be an appropriate step at this point. And I can't tell you if they were up when we went out there last time or not. I don't really recall in my mind. Part of me thinks that they had already taken them down, but I'm not 100% certain of that. But that's something that can be easily done in the meantime, I think, just to give everybody comfort that those speakers are not being used.
Because I was really, and again, I think we gave ample opportunities to say, hey, do you want to withdraw this instead of having it denied so that you don't have a 6-month time frame on it with the anticipation that fall was coming up and students back and those types of things. But so we heard that in June, so they're not eligible to come back until?
Well, I don't remember the exact action, but I think they did withdraw, didn't they? No?
No, it was denied.
It was denied, okay.
denied.
So then, yeah, 6 months. But given the nature of some of the things they have to work with, I don't know that they'll be done before then anyway, so.
Okay.
I think that's all the business we would have for you this evening, unless you have questions or anything to
I
follow up
noticed
on.
we've got a couple of young ladies out in the audience. Would you like to address the commission?
We are mostly here for training purposes.
Okay.
Would you like to do introductions, Mark?
You know, I'm sorry. I should have asked if there was any public comment, and about the time they walked out, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble now because we got 2 people who want to speak.
The Community Development Services has hired 3 new planning techs, all of who've started within the last couple of months. And so this is an opportunity to see how the boards and commissions operate, how we get set up for meetings. And so this is a learning and observation time for them, so.
Good, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Eventually, they will be
Congratulations.
clerks, so they will take on a board of their own. We don't know who's taking what, but eventually, the plan is for them to clerk a board.
Okay, so we have nobody, no public forum, nobody out there to speak, nobody online.
Nobody online.
So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. Thank you guys so much for showing up today.